There's been a lot of news lately coming from Larian. A while back we found out, to some tragically and to others felicitously, that Larian had decided to not pursue the expansion they had already begun for Baldur's Gate 3, in favor of working on new projects and their own IPs. The team was burnt out on BG3, somewhat understandably, and had found a new enthusiasm and raison d'etre in working on new projects. In addition to this, Larian has been diligently working on adding new evil endings to BG3 to round out evil playthroughs properly, and they're actively working on mod support for the game, which will make both modders' lives and players' lives that much easier. All good stuff. But in addition to these news items, there's also been news on the new IP front coming straight from the horse's mouth. In Larian's latest Steam page update, they made it known that they are chugging along well on their latest projects. Quote, being given the chance to develop a game set in the Dungeons & Dragons universe has been a dream come true for all of us. But as Sven recently confirmed, we won't be introducing any major new narrative content to the story of BG3 or its origin characters and companions, nor will we be making expansions or Baldur's Gate 4. As an independent studio since 1996, we value the freedom to follow our creativity wherever it leads. In this case, after 6 years in the Forgotten Realms and much discussion and rumination, we've decided to seize this opportunity to develop our own IPs. We're currently working on 2 new projects, and we couldn't be more excited about what the future has in store. It's early days. We'll tell you more about those later down the line. But know that even as our focus turns to these new games, the sensibilities that brought you Baldur's Gate 3 are alive and well here at Larian Castle. We're fueled by the very same fire in our bellies, one that drives us to create immersive experiences shaped by your choices, and we can't wait for you to join us on this next adventure. And if you have any worries about our change in direction, then perhaps this will help. I don't know if we're going to pull it off, but looking at our narrative, visual, and gameplay plans, I think what we're working on now will be our best work ever. I get excited like a kid watching the key imagery. Want to show to everyone now and grumble in frustration having to wait until it's actually all working. Yes, it's hype, but it's hype because it really looks and feels good. Excited Sven, April 17th, 2024. All well and good, but what few people have done is attempt to connect the dots and piece the clues together as to what they might be working on. They're currently working on 2 new projects, which is unusual, but given the size and capacity of the studio, it's not all too surprising. But before we speculate in an informed manner as to what these projects could be, we should first establish what they are not. Now, many people have speculated since Larian is working on their own IPs, this naturally would include and mean Divinity Original Sin 3, but this is probably not the case. From an article way back from last summer, Sven said that you can definitely expect Divinity Original Sin 3 from them in the future, but you shouldn't expect it soon. Larian's Divinity series began back in 2002 with the release of Divine Divinity. However, it was really 2014's Divinity Original Sin and its 2017 sequel, both of which were funded through the crowdfunding platform Kickstarter, that raised the profile of Larian Studios dramatically. Speaking to IGN about the possibility of a follow-up to Divinity Original Sin 2, Finka said, "It's our own universe we built, so we're definitely going back there at some point." And referring to finishing up Baldur's Gate 3, Sven said, "We'll first finish this one, and then take a break, because we need to refresh ourselves creatively," Finka remarks. "You're seeing 400 developers putting their hearts and souls into this. You're getting the best of them and their craft in this game. I can tell you, it's quite a thing. So don't expect to hear anything on Divinity Original Sin 3 for some time then." So you hear statements such as, "We're definitely doing this, but don't expect Divinity Original Sin 3 anytime soon." Phrases such as "at some point" and "for some time" really tell you that the time horizon for Divinity Original Sin 3 is actually quite far away. Sure, they're working on 2 IPs that are their own, and these will also take a while, but that's not the same thing as saying "at some time" or "some point." It's far more likely that they will be releasing Divinity Original Sin 3 after they've released these other projects, which indicates a much longer time horizon for the next Divinity Original Sin game. But all of this, of course, begs the question: if the next 2 titles are not Divinity Original Sin 3, some kind of mystery? Yes, but not all mysteries are without clues, so let's look at those clues, because I think they might be enlightening. Now, going back to last September, Sven had done an interview where he revealed some crucial hints as to what at least one of those projects might be, with a headline reading, "Next game from Baldur's Gate 3 creators could be sci-fi, hints director." Larian Studios boss Sven Finka says his next game is something that he's been planning for a while, and it's not necessarily a fantasy title. In his final interview of the current press cycle, he said that he's ready to move on to the next game, and has spoken about his love for both fantasy and sci-fi. Although it's open to interpretation, and you can listen to it all in the video below, questions about what Finka was inspired by when he was young seem to imply that his next game, like Baldur's Gate 3, is based on an existing property. I've always had an interest in both sci-fi and fantasy, and then there's a bunch of other things, but when it comes to entertainment, those were always my two go-to things, he said. According to Finka, whatever the new game is, he's had the idea in mind for some time now, although he couldn't elaborate further. This reminds us of a conversation we had with Finka following the first announcement of Baldur's Gate 3, in which we talked about the possibility of him working on a sci-fi game. During the conversation, we half-jokingly suggested making a Star Wars game, which he didn't directly respond to. However, he did say the following: "We're not going to stick to fantasy forever. With BG3, it was too good of an opportunity not to take, so we really wanted to do this one. I think if we hadn't done BG3, we would have made something other than fantasy." That suggests that he's had a non-fantasy game in mind for some time, presumably the same one he references in the new interview, and may have even got some way into the design stage before starting Baldur's Gate 3. So all the evidence, limited though it might be, points to a project that is not fantasy, and since Sven has two go-tos when it comes to game genres, fantasy and science fiction, and he's probably burnt out on fantasy right now, I think we can reasonably expect a science fiction title from Larian. Science fiction is something that Sven has always had an interest in, but Larian has yet to produce a science fiction game. But this theoretical science fiction title would only be one of the two games they're working on, as it's official that they're working on two new games. Larian Studios has confirmed that it's developing two new projects, separate from the Baldur's Gate franchise. These upcoming projects will feature complete original intellectual properties. "I think what we're working on now will be our best work ever," says Sven Finka, founder and CEO of Larian Studios. "After the incredible work it did with Baldur's Gate 3 and all the awards it won, we're inclined to believe it." Now pay attention again to the phrasing here. Completely original intellectual properties. Again, in theory, this could be referring to Divinity Original Sin 3, but as we've established, DOS 3 appears to be very far out, and likely something to be worked on after these two projects. It's been a rather interesting game developers conference for Larian Studios, with the developer confirming that Baldur's Gate 3 won't receive DLC, expansions, or a sequel. Instead, it has two new games in mind, including a very big RPG that will dwarf its 2023 magnum opus. Since it doesn't have the tech yet, this won't be the studio's next game. Instead, it's working on something new, which studio founder and game director Sven Finka told Eurogamer is new in the sense that it is different from the things that we've done before. It will still be familiar enough, but different, though the tone, style, way of doing it are for us certainly new, and I think very appealing. I'd love to talk about it already, because I'm very excited about it, but I can't say more. But it's new in that sense. And then further in the article, as for what the developer's next game could be, it's sadly not Divinity Original Sin 3. So there are a couple things going on here. One, a further confirmation that the next project is not DOS 3, rather further reinforcement of the idea that the next game will very likely be of the science fiction genre. And what about the other big game that will dwarf them all? Sven in fact did make that reference at some point in time. And referring to that, another headline stated, Baldur's Gate 3 boss says today's technology cannot handle his, quote, very big RPG that will dwarf them all. Hopes the PlayStation 6 generation is going to bring us closer. So when he's referring to technology, in all likelihood he is referring to the limitations of consoles. So maybe they just have the concept for it, and that is the second project, in the hopes that technology, i.e. console technology, might catch up. But we don't know exactly what's meant when Sven talks about two new projects and how Larian is approaching them. It could be that they're primarily focusing on this possible science fiction title, and the second project is known but currently on the back burner until the new technology arrives. So from all of these clues, I think we can say with some degree of confidence that the immediate next project will likely be a science fiction title, and that the other one is probably something more distant, bigger, and in need of greater technology, possibly more fantasy or fantasy-esque, with neither of them being Divinity Original Sin 3. Now personally, I tend to be more partial to fantasy, but I also understand getting burnt out on a certain genre, and I genuinely think that there's a dearth of good, high-quality science fiction RPGs out there. The ones that do exist are old and probably not going anywhere, such as Mass Effect, and the others are very niche and can only attract a limited audience, such as Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader, which is a good game, don't get me wrong, but it has limited scope and reach. If Larian can combine science fiction with their remarkable ability to create universal appeal, drawing all demographics in, without taking anything away from the features that people enjoy most, be it the cinematics, builds, mechanics, combat, or creative environmental use, then I'm pretty confident that this potential science fiction title could be genre-defining. But whatever it turns out to be, whether science fiction or not, I'm looking forward to it, as I'm sure you are as well. Thanks for watching. If you like my content, you can leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe, as it really helps out the channel. Much appreciated, and I'll check you out next time. Take care.